But as we await that, CB Cotton's working her sources on the ground there on this story as well. She is also live on the campus there, Orem, Utah. And CB, what do you have for us? Hello there.
Hey, Bill, good morning. So as we just heard from colleague David Spunt, the suspect has now been identified as Tyler Robinson, and we are hoping to learn more about who this person is at this news conference. But we heard this morning President Trump seem to suggest that a person close to Tyler turned him in. What I'm hearing from one federal source I just got a note from is that this suspect's father turned him in last night in southern Utah. And all of these moving parts come as the FBI made a huge push yesterday for more information, asking the public, come forward if you recognize this person. And after that big push from the FBI, you know, it seemed like things were moving here on the ground. We had a news conference that got pushed back several times yesterday. We also heard the president explain again how the timeline of this. He said a minister here in Utah who was friends with a U.S. Marshal got involved, and at that point, the father was contacted. And again, I'm hearing from a federal source that it was Tyler Robinson's father who turned in his son. We saw that new video yesterday, chilling, showing the gunman moving quickly across the roof and then dropping one story down before running through the parking lot. And we also learned from the FBI that the shooter then discarded the gun in a wooded area. We also got those newly released surveillance pictures of the shooter, giving us an up-close look at the shooter's face and the clothing he was wearing. And now the major development today is waiting to hear more and learn more about who Tyler Robinson is, what's his background, and what was the planning that he presumably did to take that fatal shot towards Charlie Kirk, who was speaking to a crowd of about 3,000 supporters here on this campus. Bill, I want to send it back over to you.
Thank you, CB. Stand by for more from you and others there in Utah. CB Cotton.
It's the end of a long, emotional, infuriating week, and it brings with it the end of the manhunt for Charlie Kirk's suspected assassin. After 11,000 leads and tips given to the FBI, the suspect now in custody. He's been identified as 22-year-old Tyler Robinson, a Utah native who was turned in late last night by his father. It was President Trump who first broke the news that the authorities had their guy.
I think with a high degree of certainty, we have him. In custody, right? In custody. Everyone did a great job. We worked with the local police, the governor. Everybody did a great job.
A short time later, we knew for sure.
We got him. On the evening of September 11th, a family member of Tyler Robinson reached out to a family friend who contacted the Washington County Sheriff's Office with information that Robinson had confessed to them or implied that he had committed the incident.
Who is Tyler Robinson? He is currently a third-year student in the electrical apprenticeship program at Dixie Technical College. Before that, he attended Utah State University for one semester back in 2021, where he was a pre-engineering major. He was living with his family in Utah, no criminal history, no party affiliation. None of this gives us any clues as to what would drive this person to commit this heinous act of violence. But we can do the math. We may not have an answer, but we do know that he was arrested on suspicion of capital murder, weapons, and obstruction charges, and is being expected to be charged on Tuesday. Officials say federal charges could be filed as soon as today. And this, as we learned this morning, more about the evidence tying Robinson to the shooting. Utah Governor Spencer Cox sharing that family members took note of his politics.
Investigators interviewed a family member of Robinson who stated that Robinson had become more political in recent years. The family member referenced a recent incident in which Robinson came to dinner prior to September 10th, and in the conversation with another family member, Robinson mentioned Charlie Kirk was coming to UVU. They talked about why they didn't like him and the viewpoints that he had. The family member also stated Kirk was full of hate and spreading hate.
Key pieces of evidence included messages on Discord shared with investigator by the suspect's roommates.
The content of these messages included messages affiliated with the contact Tyler, stating a need to retrieve a rifle from a drop point, leaving the rifle in a bush, messages related to visually watching the area where a rifle was left, and a message referring to having left the rifle wrapped in a towel. The messages also refer to engraving bullets and a mention of a scope and the rifle being unique.
We also got definitive answers as to what exactly was engraved on the casings.
Inscriptions on a fired casing read, "Notices, bulges, capital O-W-O, what's this, question mark." Inscriptions on the 3 unfired casings read, "Hey fascist, exclamation point, catch, exclamation point." Up arrow symbol, right arrow and symbol, and 3 down arrow symbols. A second unfired casing read, "Oh Bella Chow, Bella Chow, Bella Chow, Chow Chow." And a third unfired casing read, "If you read this, you are gay, LMAO."
Okay, so there were inscriptions on 1 fired casing. Notices, bulges, OWO, what's this? And inscriptions on 3 unfired casings. Hey fascist, catch. Up arrow, right arrow, 3 down arrows. Oh Bella Chow, Bella Chow, Bella Chow, Chow, Chow. And if you read this, you are gay, LMAO. And what is this Bella Chow? Well, it's a phrase that's recently been showing up in a few places. It's an anti-fascist anthem. In 2013, it showed up at protests in Istanbul. In 2018, protests in Brazil. Ukrainian resistance to the Russian war as well saw that phrase show up. In 2022, Iranian women protesting against the compulsory hijab. FBI Director Kash Patel, who traveled to Utah last night to be on the scene, said his agency would be on the job until it was done. He closed with a heartfelt message.
We will be here to answer every call they absolutely have, as long as it takes, for as long as we need to find and apprehend whatever suspects were involved in this crime. Lastly, to my friend Charlie Kirk, rest now, brother. We have the watch, and I'll see you in Valhalla.
Where does this investigation go from here? What are authorities currently looking at? Joining me now to discuss is retired Unified Deputy Chief of Police and former University of Utah professor Chris Bertram. Chris, thanks for being with us here today. As you look at the evidence that they've already collected, this anti-fascist quotes on the bullet casings, his posts on social media, on Discord, what do you take away from what we know now about the suspect?
You know, just again, with some of the extremist, ideologies that he may have been thinking about at the time. What we don't know is, and I think that the federal, state, and local partners probably have more information with regards to what his intent is, what he's been doing. I would imagine that investigation is going to continue until they can, really lock down who he is, what he's been doing, not just in the last few hours, but the last few weeks and months and years. And tie that back to what happened at Utah Valley University.
Chris, with the amount of information that we know right now, these anti-fascist inscriptions on the bullet casings, what he might have said at a family dinner, what he's saying on Discord channels, the truth is, the type of language that I'm seeing from this individual right now isn't particularly unique. This type of stuff can be seen all across social media. It's becoming harder, I would suspect, to distinguish some online poster who's become radicalized on the left versus someone who is willing and ready to do violence.
It does. And, we go again to our First Amendment. We have the right to say these type of things, but the violence that followed is not there. And it's incumbent upon law enforcement that we balance that with regards to the intel gathering that we do, things that raise a flag, other things that are just part of, normal critical discussions and, conversations. And I think that, with unfortunately, with individuals like him that are lone wolves, they're not sharing this. They're not participating in group chats where they're, really talking about violence. It becomes very, very difficult. Sometimes we call them the black swan events, it's just hard to predict this. to know that somebody like this that has been talking about these things, maybe with nonviolent, intents, then goes and commits an act like this.
Well, maybe that says less about this particular individual and less about law enforcement, and maybe it says more about the type of conversation that's been mainstreamed on the American left, that it's very hard to distinguish between a crazy person ready to do real violence and the type of discourse that you're seeing with greater frequency on the left. Chris, thank you for your time.
You bet. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We got him. On the evening of September 11th, a family member of Tyler Robinson reached out to a family friend who contacted the Washington County Sheriff's Office with information that Robinson had confessed to them or implied that he had committed the incident. This information was relayed to the Utah County Sheriff's Office and scene investigators at Utah Valley University. This information was also conveyed to the FBI. Investigators reviewed additional video footage from UVU surveillance and identified Robinson arriving on UVU campus in a gray Dodge Challenger at approximately 8:29 a.m. on September 10th, in which he is observed on video in a plain maroon t-shirt, light-colored shorts, a black hat with a white logo, and light-colored shoes. When encountered in person by investigators in Washington County on September 12th, in the early morning hours, Robinson was observed in consistent clothing with those surveillance images. Investigators interviewed a family member of Robinson who stated that Robinson had become more political in recent years. The family member referenced a recent incident in which Robinson came to dinner prior to September 10th, and in the conversation with another family member, Robinson mentioned Charlie Kirk was coming to UVU. They talked about why they didn't like him and the viewpoints that he had. The family member also stated Kirk was full of hate and spreading hate. The family member also confirmed Robinson had a gray Dodge Challenger. Investigators identified an individual as the roommate of Robinson. Investigators interviewed that roommate, who stated that his roommate, referring to Robinson, made a joke on Discord. Investigators asked if he would show them the messages on Discord. He opened it and showed several messages to investigators and allowed investigators to take photos of the screen as each message was shown by Robinson's roommate. These photos consisted of various messages, including content of messages between the phone contact name Tyler with an emoji icon and Robinson's roommate's device. The content of these messages included messages affiliated with the contact Tyler, stating a need to retrieve a rifle from a drop point, leaving the rifle in a bush, messages related to visually watching the area where a rifle was left, and a message referring to having left the rifle wrapped in a towel. The messages also refer to engraving bullets and a mention of a scope and the rifle being unique. Messages from the contact Tyler also mentioned that he had changed outfits. I know there has been speculation as well as to the writing on those casings, those bullet casings, and I believe we have that as well. And I will share that with you now. So the area north of Campus Drive Road where the suspect crossed over, you saw some of that in the video that we released last night, consists of a grassy area with trees on the edge of the UVU campus. Investigators discovered a bolt-action rifle wrapped in a dark-colored towel. The rifle was determined to be a Mauser Model 98 30-06 caliber bolt-action rifle. The rifle had a scope mounted on top of it. Investigators noted inscriptions that had been engraved on casings found with the rifle. Inscriptions on a fired casing read, "Notices, bulges, capital OWO, what's this, question mark." Inscriptions on the 3 unfired casings read, "Hey fascist, exclamation point, catch, exclamation point." Up arrow symbol, right arrow and symbol, and 3 down arrow symbols. A second unfired casing read, "Oh Bella Chow, Bella Chow, Bella Chow, Chow Chow." And a third unfired casing read, "If you read this, you are gay, LMAO." We are indebted to law enforcement across the state who has worked seamlessly together, local law enforcement, state law enforcement, and our federal partners with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We're grateful for everyone who worked together in such a short amount of time to find this person and to bring justice. I want to thank the public who has been so engaged, reviewing videos, helping us with sending in tips, and helping us get to this point. I want to thank the family members of Tyler Robinson who did the right thing in this case and were able to bring him into to law enforcement as well. I especially want to thank the family of Charlie Kirk, Erica, Charlie's parents, his children. I want us to be thinking of them as we bring justice in this case. They will be involved in that justice. We will be working very closely with them as we move through this process as well. This is a very sad day for our country, a terrible day for the state of Utah, but I'm grateful that at this moment we have an opportunity to bring closure to this very dark chapter in our nation's history.
To our correspondent Matt Finn, who's live outside the suspected assassin's home in southwest Utah. Matt, is there any activity there right now?
Yes, Andrea, police are fiercely protecting the home behind me, which we believe is the family home of the alleged shooter, Tyler Robinson. And if you look over my shoulder, you could see a gray Dodge Challenger. Authorities say they believe he drove a Challenger on and off the property of the university when he allegedly assassinated Charlie Kirk. Happening right now, neighbors are coming out to see the activity in this neighborhood. Obviously, they're very concerned. I just talked to one neighbor who said, unfortunately, she's not surprised because she feels like this type of political violence and hatred is showing up in all corners of the country right now. This neighborhood, a very well-kept, middle-class to upscale neighborhood. St. George, where we are right now, a couple hundred miles south of the crime scene where we've been the past couple of days. So if the shooter did indeed drive to this home, which it seems like he did, he pulled off a drive that was a couple of hundred miles here into the St. George area, which is a very beautiful scenic area of the country. So far, we have not confirmed if anybody's at home right now or if his mother and father are in the area, but we'll keep you updated from the St. George area. Sandra, John.
We know you will. Matt Finn live at the family home there. Thank you very much.
The FBI providing a massive update in the assassination of Charlie Kirk, announcing 22-year-old Tyler Robinson, who you are looking at, has been identified as the man responsible for killing Charlie Kirk at a speaking event on Utah Valley University campus. Utah Governor Spencer Cox says a family member was involved in turning Robinson in, with FBI Director Kash Patel commending his team for swiftly bringing this suspect to justice. It was about 33 hours, and they found him.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We got him.
This is what happens when you let good cops be cops. The FBI and our partners are proud to stand here today together to bring justice to the family of Charlie Kirk and honor his memory. The suspect was taken into custody at 10 p.m. local time. In less than 36 hours, 33 to be precise, thanks to the full weight of the federal government and leading out with the partners here in the state of Utah and Governor Cox, the suspect was apprehended in a historic time period.
And Kash Patel ended those remarks by saying this: to my friend Charlie Kirk, rest now, brother. We have the watch. This is Outnumbered. I'm Kaylee McEnany here with my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Emily Campagno. Also joining us, Alicia Acuna, Fox News senior correspondent, and John Yoo, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General, UC Berkeley law professor, and former Justice Thomas law clerk. We begin with Paul Morrow, retired NYPD inspector. He's on the scene. He has been there since yesterday. Paul, we've been keeping in touch, and one of the aspects of this was the Discord messaging that took place between the roommate and between Tyler Robinson. And I just want to list for our viewers what we know about those Discord messages. There was talk about needing to retrieve a weapon from a drop point. There was mention of a weapon in a bush. To visually watch the area, it was wrapped in a towel in this message. Engraved bullets were mentioned as well. A weapon that was unique, a scope, and changed outfits. That seems like a pretty detailed description of what happened in messages with a roommate.
Yes, it does, and it argues perhaps that the roommate was cognizant of what was going to occur or had just occurred, and that's absolutely going to be a very, very focused aspect of this investigation. You can imagine federal government pulling very hard at this. John, you will tell you that almost certainly by now a preservation order has been issued to Discord, which is a gaming app, to make sure they preserve all relevant stuff relative to this case that's on their servers. They're in San Francisco, so you can get to them. It's not like reaching some overseas entity. And they're going to be looking, that is the feds, will be looking for a potential federal nexus, something going across state lines or that implicates a federal statute. And one of the things that could happen here is that if this was a conspiracy, if there were a few people involved and they're communicating by Discord, well, there's your element. There's your operative element of a federal crime, because internet messages go across state lines. It's used for jurisdiction all the time. You have your federal conspiracy case, and that whole thing's in Fedland.
You know, Paul, I also want to quickly tick through some of the messages that we learned were on the bullets, including, "Hey, fascist." There was a mention, if you read this, quote, "You are gay, LMAO." Some of them indiscernible messages. We also know that he, in fact, was at a family dinner where he articulated that Charlie Kirk was coming to that campus, that he did not like Charlie Kirk, and that he felt Charlie Kirk was full of hate. That dinner had to have taken place in the last 6 days. That is the timeline in which Charlie Kirk announced this event. I bring up all this information because you've got the conspiracy hook there potentially for federal charges. But what about terrorism? Because some of this points to perhaps having a political motive.
You can call something domestic terrorism without actually charging it. The instances of federal charges being brought for terrorism not involving a foreign entity are as rare as hen's teeth. Almost always you need a foreign entity involved for the federal terrorism charges. So I'm skeptical of getting federal terrorism charges on this, but I don't think it really matters. In fact, I would argue you may be better off with the state charges, because state prosecutors are much more used to doing murder prosecutions, which is essentially what this is. So unless it takes an unexpected turn here, I think that ultimately this devolves to state court, unless I said we get this conspiracy piece. And again, they're going to be pulling in all of this. It'll be interesting to watch how the arraignments go. You'll remember the Manhunt thing where they were dueling arraignments. I think a lot of that was because the federal government really didn't trust Alvin Bragg's office to bring that case in. This case, I don't think they'll have those trepidations. So let's see who ends up with the arraignment and who ultimately prosecutes the case.
And of course, the death penalty being an option there in Utah. Paul Morrow, thank you. We'll get back with you. But for now, let's bring in former FBI Assistant Director Chris Swecker. Chris, I want to ask you what is happening right now, because we've learned just a little bit, just a sliver of what the FBI knows. I imagine there are search warrants. I imagine they are pouring through devices, looking through computers, finding anything that could hint at a possible motive or a possible conspiracy.
Right. All of the above. Search warrants at his house, wherever he's, wherever his car, his mobile device, his laptop, his computer, social media sites, as Paul has pointed out. And I'll reinforce what Paul just said. I agree with him 100%. I think you're going to have to they're trying to find a federal nexus here, but I think they're going to have to shoehorn something in. John can, shed more light on this, but I have scoured the statutes. I cannot find one that actually fits here that would carry the same gravity and death sentence that a Utah state first-degree murder charge would bring. So, and they're also in the process now. We've moved from manhunt to prosecution. We're going to build a prosecution here, match the forensic evidence with the subject, talk to people, harvest all that computer forensics, electronic forensics. All that takes time. And, he has 3 days to go before the formal charges are filed in Utah. So there's a little bit of time there. But I really, really don't think we're going to see a federal crime charged here that carries the same gravity and certainty that you would have in Utah under a state charge.
Chris, last hour, 2 hours ago rather, Jim Trusty mentioned, an attorney, that there was not a prosecutor that he saw at that press conference, and that was strategic. And they strategically put out the evidence in a way that, you know, did due diligence to what the public needs to know, but regarding and keeping mindfulness of the sanctity of the prosecution, he noted. If you're an FBI agent, how do you determine what the public should know and what you hold back?
Yeah, and I'm also a former state prosecutor, so I look at it from both angles. And you have to have a lot of discipline at this stage of the proceedings to make sure that you're not giving more information than you should. I mean, there are federal guidelines, the U.S. Attorney's Manual and Department of Justice guidelines lay out what you can put out there at this stage of the proceedings, and it's pretty bare bones information. You don't want your witnesses getting their information from the media, and you don't want to feed details that aren't necessary to feed to certain witnesses. You want them to have their own recollection. So you don't want to so-called taint the prosecution in any way. You err on the side of caution. So I am a little bit surprised there wasn't a prosecutor there, because they should be there to kind of pull back on the reins if they need to. The last thing you want to do at this juncture is jeopardize a prosecution.
You know, Chris, a final question to you. There was talk this morning from the President of the United States, some details about the family member that turned Tyler Robinson in. That came, we now know, at the evening of September 11th. We've seen a lot of cases where there are family members that cover for their children, in particular parents, hide their children. Based on what the president said, it seems like perhaps the father was involved in keeping this individual detained and ultimately turning him over. The big break was a family member who came forward.
Yeah, and apparently the father is a sheriff's deputy. So this is not unheard of, but it's actually the best possible scenario here, based on, and that's what they were shooting for when they put out that information and the photos and all of that, was someone close to him got the information to the right people, and they foreclosed a shootout or a suicide. So this family member did this out of compassion for the for their son or their loved one. So this is hard to do. You can imagine the gut-wrenching decision that they had to make, but it was the right thing to do. And I've seen it happen before, but it is fairly rare, as you pointed out. But this is what we wanted to happen.
Yeah, and last night, we were anticipating a press conference, and I was sitting there in for Jesse Waters, and I was told we're camera chasing down a street, and now it was 250 miles away. That would have been a ton of camera chasing. That was indeed happening, but now we know that it was a father, a family member that excuse me one moment in my ear, there was a family member that made that big break. Thank you very much, Chris Swecker.
Thank you.
President Trump this morning on Fox and Friends, he said he will attend the funeral for Charlie Kirk. We're not privy yet to information about those arrangements, and we'll be getting that information, I would assume, fairly soon. But the president spoke very movingly about what Kirk meant to him when he was on the couch this morning with Fox and Friends.
You know, Don said to me, he's sort of like a son to you. He was an unbelievable talent. But he was more, it wasn't really so much a talent. He just really believed it. He just believed it. He loved young people. He wanted to help young people. And he didn't deserve this. He was truly a good person.
I spoke a short time ago with Donald Trump Jr. Don, great to have you with us. I'm so sorry for the loss of this deep friend to all of you and to so many of us as well. He was a wonderful young man with a huge future ahead of him. And now we're learning. We've seen a picture of Tyler Robinson, 22 years old. The reports are that his father helped to bring him in, which must have been, you can't even imagine that situation for a family. Now that we have a sense of who this person is, this suspect, what goes through your mind as you look at this picture of him?
It's just been very hard, Martha. When you think about what's gone on over the last few years, when you look at the vilification of Charlie that I'm seeing every day, since then, the celebration of his assassination in cold blood in front of his wife and young children, it's truly disgusting. I mean, what was Charlie's real crime? He spoke truth. Every day, Martha, he platformed his biggest detractors. He gave the people who hated him most an opportunity to argue their standpoint, to have that in polite conversation. And he did a great job with that. The reason he was so effective with so many young people was they heard these arguments. And you realized very quickly when Charlie was conversing very cordially, again, with those leftists, that, wow, not only is the Democrat argument, the idea is bad, it's outright asinine in so many cases. And that's why he was so effective. And that's why he was a threat. He wasn't a threat because he posed any kind of actual physical threat to anyone. He was a threat because he was incredibly effective at taking their narrative and destroying it. That's why he was so good at what he did. So it's really hard to see this when I see the picture of the shooter and a young radicalized person. And I believe the reports about, all of the trans propaganda inscribed on the cartridges in the rifles. I mean, these are exactly the kinds of things. Charlie's crime was talking about God, family, country, all those things that are verboten to Democrats. God forbid you like those things. God forbid you like the Constitution. It'd be the true crime is saying, that men can't be women and men shouldn't be playing in women's sports. I mean, these are not exactly radical concepts, although when the left realizes that you're losing arguments, they resort to this violence. But I see the constant, the violence goes both ways, and it does not, Martha. The violence is going one way. I've had to deal with, 3 shootings like this to people really near and dear to me in the last 14 months, and I'm getting sick of it.
We've learned a little bit about these engravings, and so far, 2 of them are kind of difficult to understand. One has to do with an anti-fascist song in Italy in World War II. The other one says, "Hey, fascist, catch this," on the bullet, which is just chilling. When you look at this young man and you think about how, honestly, I can't get over how many similarities there are to Thomas Crooks in Butler, Pennsylvania, Don. These are about the same age, these young men. Neither one appeared to have any social media profile. In both cases, you have someone who was on the scene, who has a cell phone video prior to the shooting. Hey, look, there's somebody up there on the roof. The setup is very similar, an outdoor venue, a rooftop about 150 yards away from what we understand. And these young men who, in this case, got off this perfect shot. I'm curious what you think about that as a hunter yourself. What stands out to you when you think about how similar these are?
Well, it's amazing to me. I don't understand fully, Martha, how a 20-something-year-old kid can get radicalized today without a online presence. That doesn't seem to happen.
Yeah.
Unless, again, they've been scrubbed because they're trying to cover up their tracks or their actual motive because it would be worse for their cause or whatever that is. I don't want to speculate on that. I mean, I do find, and I know Charlie and I spoke about this frequently, sort of the irony of the anti-fascists these days. They seem to be taking a lot of playbooks out of the fascists, out of the browncoats. I mean, if you don't agree with someone, kill them. I mean, that seems quite fascist to me. So, I wish we would stop calling them Antifa because there's nothing anti about their fascist tendencies. It's absolutely disgusting. But there is something very odd that someone could get that radicalized with none of those footprints. So, I don't want to speculate. I don't have any additional information about what these things are. But I will say, watching the left turn this violent when they don't get their way, it's almost as though, Martha, they know they've lost the plot. They know they've lost the debate. So rather than lose the debate and adapt, or maybe, I don't know, wildly, come up with a better idea or a better concept or be reasonable, implement some common sense, they realize they lost the debate entirely, so they have to resort to violence. And contrary to what we're seeing elsewhere and online, it is not going both ways. It is going one way. It's coming from those aligned with the Democrat Party. The hate has been fomented by those in the Democrat Party, and you can probably play hundreds of hours of those clips. It's coming from the media. Some of them are doing a quick course correction and probably scrub their social media feeds for all the things they've said about Charlie, myself, my father over the last few years. But you can't call someone who you disagree with or simply can't win an argument with a Nazi, a fascist, a dictator, a greatest threat to democracy in the history of civilization, and then pretend you had nothing to do with it when the more radical wing, and there does not seem to be all that much difference to me these days, takes up arms and tries to kill those they disagree with. It's not one way. It's not both ways. It is simply one way. And anyone who's saying otherwise, should be thrown off the air.
Let's play this from Governor Cox. He spoke just moments ago. He said, I've never felt so angry and so sad in such a short period of time in his life. Here's what he had to say just moments ago, Don.
I absolutely believe that this is a watershed in American history, yes. The question is what kind of watershed? And that chapter remains to be written. Is this the end of a dark chapter in our history or the beginning of a darker chapter in our history?
What's your reaction to that?
I agree with him. I mean, not to use the pun, but I definitely think it's a turning point. When I see what's going on online on both sides, I see the left celebrating these things, and I'm seeing the reaction of the right, who's finally waking up and understanding exactly what it seems that they would love to do to us. I mean, I know, they wanted to put me in jail, and they tried to kill my father twice, and they wanted to take away his businesses, and they wanted to throw him in jail too. And you see the scores and scores of this, again, only coming from one side. I've had those conversations with Charlie so many times. I mean, he was able to go out there under, threat all the time because he truly just believed in his faith. He believed in the mission. He believed in God and that he was doing the right thing for our country. And I agree with him 100%. I think he'd want us to make sure that we recognize that threat, that we act as he would, but that we remain unafraid, that we get out there and have these conversations. Because the only way I think at this point that the Democrats and the left actually win this argument is if they're successful in silencing us, in putting us in fear, making sure we never have that dialogue. The silent majority is real. It's there. When we started talking about these things on college campuses, Charlie and I, back in 15 and 16, where that was unheard of for a conservative group to go into a college campus and try to win them over. When you have that dialogue, you realize, wait a second, there's a lot more people with us than against us. They've just been pressured by so many things. Again, the media, social. I mean, it felt like an insurmountable obstacle for so long. I don't think that's the case anymore. You see so many people who are apolitical but reasonable, perhaps even left-leaning and reasonable, being like, okay, this has gone too far. This is insane. So I think if we do what Charlie had tried to do for years, which is bringing people together, uniting them in a common cause for what's going to be good for our country, our children, and most importantly, our civilization, I think if we keep that going and don't become afraid, Charlie's legacy will be well served.
More of my interview with Donald Trump Jr. coming up later this hour.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.